Hey guys, Noah Galloway here, and I need your help with something really important. Sojourn Counseling, a nonprofit that's close to my heart, is on a mission to provide quality mental health care to anyone, no matter their ability to pay. They specialize in post-traumatic stress and trauma recovery, helping people heal and find hope. I know firsthand how important that is because I use their services myself. The work they do has made a real impact on my life, just like it has for so many others. Last year alone, they served over 800 clients and gave back more than $300,000 in sliding scale and pro bono services. That's life-changing work. But now they need us. Sojourn is launching a custom Alabama license plate. But here's the catch. We need 1,000 pre-commitments before May 15th for it to go into production. If we don't hit that goal, we miss our chance. The good news? They're covering the $50 pre-commitment fee for everyone who wants a plate. All you have to do is go to eddies.org, fill out the quick Google form, and get your free plate. Once it's official, these plates will provide years of funding for Sojourn Counseling, helping even more people recover from post-traumatic stress and trauma. But it's not just about the funding. These plates will serve as powerful beacons of hope, reminding those living with post-traumatic stress that healing is possible. So if you're in Alabama, we need you to act now. Go to eddies.org today and sign up for your free license plate. One more thing, share this video. Post it on your social media. Spread the word. Together we can make a huge difference for people who are struggling. Let's show them there's hope. Thanks for helping us make this happen. All right, Stephen, this is episode 4. I'm extremely excited because this is our first episode that we have a guest. And, one, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I can't wait. Like this is, to see this dynamic and to see these ideas actually come into real life. It's pretty exciting. So I'm excited for it. I'm grateful that Beau's here. It is minus a lot here in Canada today, but it is what it is.
All right. Well, let me introduce Beau. Beau Armistead is who's joined us. Beau is a licensed professional counselor. He has decades of experience working with adolescents and adults in areas like PTSD, trauma, substance abuse, and family issues. He's also a certified EMDR therapist and a provider of microcurrent neurofeedback therapy, which are both powerful tools for helping people navigate mental health challenges. Beau's approach focuses on creating safe, non-judgmental space to help individuals find balance and live more abundantly. I'm really looking forward to hearing Beau's story, learning more about the work he does. He is my therapist. I have done EMDR. I've done microcurrent neurofeedback. I am a fan. But before we even get into that, Beau, welcome to the podcast with Stephen and I, Living with No Excuses. And first, introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to be here. And Stephen, I'm glad that it's not minus a lot here. We had a cold couple of weeks here, and we didn't get minus anything, and that was plenty. So we're back into the 30s and 40s now, and it's probably feels like summer.
It feels a lot warmer after that cold snap. Yeah. Doesn't it feel hot now?
Yeah, it's real. I didn't even wear a jacket this morning. So
we were laughing about that yesterday. We were heading to a concert, and Wednesday it felt like minus 22. Yesterday it was only like minus 7, and we're all like, "Oh, I'm wearing my spring and fall jacket." Because what did we say in episode 1? Noah, comparison is the thief of joy. Well, sometimes comparison brings about a little bit of gratitude too.
All right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
So, Beau, first of all, where are you from? How did you get into what you're doing? What made you become who you are today?
Wow, man, how much time do we have?
We can edit out whatever we have to.
So where I'm from, I moved around a lot growing up. So I've spent most of my life here in Alabama, in Birmingham. Bounced around a whole lot between birth and graduating college, and then landed in Birmingham. I've been here since I left Auburn in 1995. So, but yeah, how I got into this, early on, I mean, even in high school, probably, I think I thought that I wanted to be a counselor. It's just kind of what felt right to me. And went on to college, got a degree in psychology. By the time I finished school, I thought that I had had enough school and didn't need to didn't need any more of that. So took me, years later, decided, I really felt that calling again, wanted to be back in that line of work. And I did for years, like you said, decades. I mean, I was a counselor at an alternative high school for kids who had been removed from regular high schools for behavioral issues and truancy and things. I worked as a case manager at a program in Birmingham for people who had been convicted of felonies, who run drug screening and case management. So kind of in and out of the mental health and substance abuse and trauma world. Spent years, interestingly, in a ministry where we traveled, reaching nomadic subcultures of people. So people who are living on the road in their cars, following bands around the country, going to music festivals, living in the national forests, hopping freight trains, like all different varieties of nomadic subcultures. And we'd go out there and provide food and water and first aid for people who living on the roads. And we kind of lived on the road too. We converted a school bus that we lived out of when we traveled, called that school bus the grilled cheese wagon. And because it was a cheese wagon, like a big school bus, and we gave away grilled cheese sandwiches. So it was the grilled cheese wagon. We did that for years. During our time on the road is kind of what led me back to wanting to do mental health work, and that's that I saw a lot of trauma out there. I saw a lot of people who were living that lifestyle because of the trauma they had experienced early on in life, and people who didn't even have homes to return to. So, living in the woods or hopping trains or living out on the road following bands around the country. It's not everybody's story, but for a lot of people, their story was they didn't have anywhere else to be, and their family on the road felt more like family than where their family of origin. And so seeing that trauma really just kind of led me back to, kind of wanting to be better equipped to serve people and see people heal when they're living out of the context of their trauma. So went back, got a degree in mental health counseling with a passion then and still a passion to just see people heal from trauma and difficult past experiences.
So now you run Sojourn Counseling.
Mm-hmm.
When did that start, and what brought you to want to create your own thing that you have right now?
Yeah, a good question. So 2012 started Sojourn, and it was just me at the time, and there are I think 11 of us now, so it's grown over the years, but the mission then is the same as it is now. And so we're a nonprofit. Sojourn Counseling is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So we raise funds to be able to provide sliding scale and pro bono services for people who aren't able to pay out of pocket for services. Something that I know to be true still, and back when I started Sojourn, is that quality mental health care doesn't come cheap. And so if you're paying out of pocket, a lot of people are prevented from getting the care that they need because their bank account may be different than someone else's. And so, our mission statement here at Sojourn is to provide quality mental health care to anyone, regardless of their ability to pay. And everyone we have here is on board with that mission. That's why they're here. And so all of our counselors work on a sliding scale. And like I said, we raise funds to be able to offset those fees. And it's really cool. It's cool to see people who get on board with that and want to support what we're doing and contribute funds to that. In 2024, we served over 800 clients here and provided more than $300,000 in sliding scale and pro bono services. And so just to see that happening and to see the community come behind that and support us financially so that we can offer those services, it's the best thing ever. And my goal here again, after having so many relationships with people on the road who are living out of trauma, seeing people who literally live in their cars and live in the woods and live that kind of lifestyle, and by choice, it's not a bad lifestyle for a lot of people, but I wanted Sojourn to be a place that's safe and comfortable for everyone. So, whether you're a millionaire and you got all the money that you need in the bank and you live in a big nice house and drive a nice car and whatever, I want you to be comfortable here. And if you're living in your pickup truck out in the woods somewhere because that's all you got, I want you to have the same experience that the other people are having, and not come into some subpar place that's not as comfortable. And I want everyone to have the same experience. I want everyone to have the same opportunities for healing, regardless of your financial situation. So that's what Sojourn is.
You mentioned, I'll say it, my wife, all three of my kids have used your services. And what I love is there are multiple people, because, each one of us sees a different one of your counselors for different reasons. And I bring that up because I want to make a point of saying, of the years that I have attempted mental health, like, I feel like my experience, there's two things that I found to be true. One, a person has to be ready to commit to mental health for it to work. It doesn't matter who they see or what they're doing. If they're not committed to opening up and making that work, that's going to hold them back. But then also being comfortable with who you see. I don't think, then you could answer this better, I don't think any counselor is ever offended if there's not a connection, if the person has to be comfortable with who they're talking to in order to open up. And, do you find that to be true? And could you elaborate on it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think we'll get into a little trauma discussion here in a little bit, but one of the things that is so very important in any counseling setting, especially when you're in the process of healing from trauma, is felt safety. And so we really value felt safety around here. And that felt safety and actual safety are two different things. We know for sure that everyone who comes in this place is going to be safe. We know this is a safe environment. But if you don't feel safe when you walk in here, it doesn't matter if you're safe or not, because if you don't feel safe, that's what matters. And so we very much value felt safety, and that's having that rapport with your therapist. Having that connection is absolutely one of the most important things, because if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to kind of let your guard down, let your defenses down, and be able to enter into the process the way that you need to. And so, no offense whatsoever. I mean, I'll tell people, if there's any reason whatsoever that this place or me or any of our counselors make you feel uncomfortable, we're not offended by that. Like, find somewhere where you feel comfortable, where you feel safe, where you can enter into your healing process, without having these kind of roadblocks of things that may be triggering for you. I mean, if you were harmed by someone as a child that looked like me, like some old dude with a white beard, like walking into my office may not feel safe to you. And yeah, rightfully so. I don't want that to be your experience. And so, we all, never any offense in that. Like, we all want the very best for everyone who sets foot in here. And if that means going somewhere else, then, that's fantastic. We'll try to help you find the best place in town for you.
Hey, so Beau, I first off love what you guys do, and the fact that you are open to everybody coming in, I applaud you. And the fact that the community's behind you, so often there's kind of the idea of the tragedy of the commons, what's best for me and mine, as opposed to a we and an us. And the fact that you have the community behind you is, again, I applaud the work that you do. When we talk about feeling safe and finding a therapist, what advice would you give somebody who's looking for a therapist to feel safe, especially somebody who might not have done therapy or has yet to start their journey of therapy?
Sure. Yeah. That's different for everyone, depending on what you're dealing with and what you need to work through. Everyone is going to have, every individual client has their own story, and the uniqueness of that story is going to it's also going to mean that they need a very unique and special situation for counseling, so whoever they feel safe with. And so credentials is important. When someone needs to deal with trauma, and I can get on a soapbox about this because I've seen the results of people who go to people who are not qualified. But if you need to deal with trauma, you need to see a trauma therapist, And so when you look at someone's credentials online or whatever, if you're going to be dealing with trauma, make sure that person is qualified, not only in their education, but their experience and their continued education and certifications, things that they have to deal specifically with what you're dealing with. And I'm saying trauma because that's mostly what we work with here, mostly what I work with. But whatever your specific thing is, if you need help in your marriage, go to someone who has years of experience in marriage counseling. That's not me. Don't come see me.
Look for somebody who has direct experience in whatever you're looking for treatment in.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Even, and I can be a stickler about this too, but EMDR therapy is becoming more and more popular. There's a lot of EMDR therapists out there, which is fantastic. I'm a huge EMDR fan. Like Noah said, I'm a certified EMDR therapist and a consultant, and I love EMDR. Because any therapist can be trained in EMDR, there are a lot of people who have gone through the initial training for EMDR and have not taken that training any further, haven't gained a whole lot of experience in that, but they can say on their website or on their profiles online or whatever that they're an EMDR therapist because they did this initial training, which is fantastic. I'm grateful for anyone who gets that training. But if you get that training and you leave it there, and that's the end of it, then you may not be the best qualified. Looking for someone who has years of experience, or not years, but someone who takes it seriously, someone who practices it regularly, someone who does continuing education and takes it to the fullest. That's going to be your best bet. It's finding someone who's qualified, finding someone who's got the education, certification, the experience, and back to the first question of safety, someone who you feel like you can connect with and relate to.
We're going to go more into, I want you to explain to all of us what EMDR therapy is, but it does bring things up. And if that therapist isn't prepared to handle it, that could really be detrimental to the patient because it does bring things up. So we're going to get into that. I'm going to go into this next question with sharing a little story. The other day I was with a friend of mine that I served in the military with, and he has some trauma, he has some issues, whether it's from childhood, the military. I can't speak on that, but he literally told me, because we're close, so he keeps up with me, I keep up with him, and he told me that my doing a podcast and talking about mental health, he literally said it triggers him. And he's like, don't do that. No one wants to hear about that, this and that, because he is someone that has not accepted, he doesn't want to do the mental health work yet. I'm hoping that something will be said here that would allow someone, how would we get someone who doesn't realize what it does, not only to them, but how it affects their family, their friends. And I want to stress to people like that the importance of mental health and doing work like this, not just for their own well-being, but what it does generationally and how it affects them at home. So explain to us, what is EMDR? What does it stand for? What is it? Let's dive into what that is and how we explain to people how important it is.
Sure. And you make a lot of good points and ask a lot of good questions there that I'd like to address. I think that for starters, if it's cool with you, I'd like to take it all the way back and explain what trauma is and what trauma is, and then how these modalities are helpful. So
trauma, PTSD.
Yeah.
I heard a good friend once said, we're all just adults living with our parents' childhood trauma, because so much of that, to Noah's point, is generational. If you don't deal with it, you're going to pass it on to your kids.
Yeah, and then the cool thing is that when you do deal with it and you do experience your own healing, you're going to pass that on to your kids too. It's got a ripple effect. So your trauma can have a ripple effect generations out, and your healing can have a ripple effect generations out. And so,
beautifully.
it's very cool to see that. So trauma, PTSD. So for starters, let me just say, we call it PTSD because that's what post-traumatic stress disorder, it's what it's known by, it's what's most recognizable. I'm gradually trying to move away from that PTSD because I don't believe, post-traumatic stress is an injury. It's not a disorder. And so if you've experienced trauma, whether or not, and honestly, PTSD is a diagnosis. I mean, you can have PTSD without having the diagnosis because the impact of trauma on your brain and your body is the same, whether or not you've gone to a psychologist and gotten a diagnosis of PTSD. You got it. And but PTSD is a diagnosis, and I don't believe it's a disorder. I believe it's an injury, and like all injuries, you can heal. And so, and that's what I'm all about here at Sojourn, and the work that I do is healing, not coping, not white knuckling your way through life, not learning how to just get through and manage your PTS, post-traumatic stress, but to heal from it, because I know you can. And so I like to make that distinction. I think that post-traumatic stress is an injury, not a disorder. I think that, and the diagnosis is important for people who are in the military. You need that rating for your disability rating. That's great. But I just like to clarify. I don't think it's a disorder. I think it's an injury, and I think as with all injuries, you can heal. And so, in that, the way I view trauma in our brain, I think our brain is like a filing cabinet, and so everything that we experience every day goes into this filing cabinet. So, if you experience a normal day, normal whatever that is, without trauma, you go to sleep at night, you experience rapid eye movement sleep. That's your brain's natural process of processing the events of your day and filing it away in your filing cabinet. And I sort of picture this filing cabinet as very organized, very tidy, very, I've never been to an accountant's filing cabinet, but I think if I go into an accountant's office and look at the filing cabinet, I would imagine that it'd be like numerical and like alphabetical and like all tidy and everything's just as it should be. That's the way your brain is when it's processing normal events from a normal day. At the end of each day, it's filed away and it's all done. If you experience a traumatic event on a particular day, our brains can't process trauma. They can process anything we experience in life, but not trauma. So it's like taking that piece of paper that's your day, and instead of filing it away nice and tidy at the end of the day, it's like wadding it up and throwing it on top of the file cabinet because it has nowhere to go. And so now from that point on, everything associated with that particular trauma is just hanging out there. Sights, sounds, smells, physical sensations, emotions, all of that connected to that traumatic event are just sitting there and they're right beneath the surface. And that's where post-traumatic stress comes in, is hypervigilance and increased anxiety and all the things, nightmares, flashbacks, short fuse, anger. The things that go along with post-traumatic stress are because all of the details of that traumatic event are just kind of lurking out there right beneath the surface and kind of flowing through the undercurrent of how you are each day. And so that leads me to another point. I said how you are. So trauma changes how you are. It doesn't change who you are. And you can heal the how part and you can get back to the who. So I have people all the time say, man, I was this person before my deployment or before this traumatic event happened, whether it's an accident or a crime or assault, rape, like whatever. I was this person before and now I'm this person and I don't like this person that I've become. And what I get to say to them, because it's true, is that's not who you are. Like who you are didn't change. How you are changed. And the reason the how part of you changed is because your brain changed when you experienced a trauma. And you can heal from that. You can heal the how and get back to the who. And so, oftentimes people come in here like, man, I don't like who I am at home. I don't like who I am with my wife and with my kids, and come in the door at night and kick the dog and like all this. I don't like who I am. And again, I get to say that's not who you are. That's how you are. Let's do some healing work. Let's take care of the how and get back to the who. If it's who you are, then it wouldn't bother you that that's how you are. If you're like, well, I'm a jerk and I don't like being a jerk, well, then you're probably not a jerk. You're reacting out of your trauma, and you can take care of that and get back to who you are. So that's part of where healing comes in, and that's what I get excited about, because I get to see healing happen and it's real. So
how do you decrumple that piece of paper that's on top of the filing cabinet, Chuck? Or excuse me, Beau.
So I'll tell you how we get there. That's the EMDR therapy, and that's microcurrent neurofeedback. And So leading into that answer, I'll say this: like, there's a difference in disturbing events and traumatic events. And so the example that I like to use a lot is that if you are stuck in a traffic jam, I don't know how things are where you are, Steve. Here in Birmingham, there's always traffic jams.
Downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
They say in Canada you have 2 seasons, winter and construction.
Yeah, right. It sounds like Birmingham minus the winter. Like, it's just accidents in construction in Birmingham. There's always something blocking the way. But if
So
you're
disturbing and trauma.
yeah, so disturbance trauma. So if you're stuck in a traffic jam and you've got an appointment to be at, so I've got to be here at 10 o'clock and it's 9:45 and I'm in 30 or 45 minutes worth of traffic. That's disturbing. And so you may be getting upset and banging on your steering wheel and cussing out the guy next to you and all this kind of stuff because you're disturbed in the moment because you're going to be late to this appointment that's important. 24 hours later, you're not still going to be feeling that about that traffic jam. It's not going to be 10 o'clock the next morning or 9:30 the next morning. You're not still going to be like, oh my gosh, no, because like you went to sleep, your brain processed that disturbing event. It's all done. It's filed away. It's in the filing cabinet. Nice clean sheet of paper. It's all done. Trauma, if you experienced a trauma at the same time on the same day, the next day you'd still be feeling it. The next year you may still be feeling it. 25 years later you may still be feeling it if you think back on that thing. What happens with EMDR therapy is that we take that traumatic event, process through it, which I'll explain that in a minute, but we process through it, and then it turns into like a disturbing event where you can look back on it. You're like, hey, that thing happened and that sucked and I don't want to do that again. But I'm not feeling it anymore as if I'm still in that moment. That's what EMDR therapy does. So EMDR therapy stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So the eye movement part basically is mimicking the process of rapid eye movement sleep that you experience when you go to sleep at night. And that's taking your brain to a natural process of processing through the events of your traumatic day of that event, allowing your brain to make sense of it. It's connecting the language part of your brain and the image part of your brain, because something with trauma is your brain doesn't have words for it because your brain doesn't know what to do with it because it can't process it. So oftentimes you can't really articulate what I'm feeling about this thing or what happened with this thing because your brain can't make sense of it. It brings together the images and the words to allow you to gain some clarity and to reduce the disturbance around a particular event as you file it away. And it's, EMDR, the eye movement is based on bilateral stimulation. So the way I do it is I'll sit in front of someone and I'll direct their eyes back and forth with my fingers. And that back and forth bilateral stimulation is calming for your brain. It's also dual attention. So it's kind of taking a little bit of your attention off the really disturbing event so you don't have to feel all of it. And it's connecting things in your brain that allow you to file that stuff away. So at the end of that process, whatever that event may be, again, it can be combat, it can be an accident, it can be an assault or crime or whatever. At the end of that thing, we haven't erased your memory. You still know like that thing happened and that wasn't good. I don't want to do that again, but I'm not feeling it now the way I felt it then. And so you've taken out some of that hypervigilance and some of that disturbance, nightmares, flashbacks, anger, the things that go along with that particular event. And some kind of way I like to describe like how we carry trauma is like we all come into this world with an empty backpack. And as we experience traumatic events, it's like putting a stone in that pack. And when we go through life and we just keep adding stones, bricks, whatever, like heavy things to our pack. And so we get burdened, we get weighted down with this stuff. And it's in there, it's weighting us down, it's affecting how we live life. Even if we can't always see it. Like sometimes people are like, I feel all this stuff, but I can't remember the details of this particular trauma, or I can't remember what exactly, but I still feel the burden of it. And that's like, you got a backpack on, you can't necessarily see what's in there all the time, but you can feel the weight of it. And as we begin to get to stuff, whether it's an identified trauma or something that you're just not sure, but it's burdening you, as we process those things, it's like taking a stone out of your pack. Sometimes people say to me, if I've got older clients, they'll say, hey, it's too late for me, and I'm too old to begin getting into this stuff. Like I missed my chance. I'm like, no, you didn't. Because if you got a 100-pound pack on your back and we start the work now, regardless of how old you are, and we take out a 10-pound rock and a 5-pound rock and a 20-pound rock, like, you're reducing the weight and the burden that you're carrying through life for however many days you have left. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can do the work now. You can lighten your load and experience some healing. And that's if you can identify the trauma. And not always, if you can't even identify it, you still got the weight in your back. We can still work on those things in certain ways. So
I love the analogy of the rocks because what it makes me think of is, I'm going to use the example of myself. I'm missing an arm and a leg. Obviously something traumatic happened to me, but it's not the only weight that I'm carrying. And like when I meet people and they see me, they're like, "Oh, well, I mean, you should be in therapy." No, we all should be in therapy. You actually said one day, you said to me, you said, if you're living, you're experiencing trauma. And an example I want to give is something that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. My wife and I, there are moments that we've had that should have been great playful moments of me doing something and her laughing at me and us both finding humor out of it. But there were moments I had just as simple as being a child and feeling that I was being mocked and laughed at. And it triggers it as a 43-year-old man. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, why, suddenly I'm looking at it like, why am I angry? Why is this bothering me? And it's because of something I'm carrying from a long time ago, whether that's a big stone or a small rock, it is adding that weight. So I love that analogy of the backpack and the weight, because we're constantly having things happen, whether it happens to us. Another thing that I crossed my mind as you were saying that is people don't think about the trauma that is experienced when you see trauma happen to someone else. I literally was in the grocery store this morning, ran into a buddy of mine's wife, and then she was telling me about the job he has now and how the other day there was an incident where their lift truck, they were electrocuted, and there were workers around that could not do anything about it. And my immediate thought was the trauma that everyone in that area experienced from it. And I don't think enough people realize that is something else that is just the trauma that is just going to weigh them down if it's not dealt with and taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, that's important, that like work-related trauma like that is real. Like witnessing, we talked about the things you can experience, but witnessing those things for other people is also a trauma on the person who's viewing it. And so then you start to think about police officers and firefighters and paramedics and people who are witnessing hard things every day. That has a cumulative effect, because you're seeing this stuff over and over. And I think that, and it's different. And you talk about your childhood stuff, like we talk about trauma in big T and little T trauma. Big T trauma is like where this one event happens and that changed the rest of my life. So, in a terrible car accident, and from that point on,
losing an arm and a leg.
Yeah, right. Combat, getting injured in combat. Like this thing happened, from that day on, things are different for me. Things are different, maybe physically, but also mentally and emotionally. And that's a big T trauma. And some people have lots of big T traumas. Some people have one big T trauma or two big T traumas. But regardless, that thing happened and it changed the course of life, what life looked like at that point. Little T trauma is more along the lines of what you're talking about. Like you're laughed at as a kid. You get laughed at on the playground as a kid one day. It's not going to change the rest of your life. It's going to hurt your feelings, yes, and you're not going to like it. But that one event on that one day is not going to change the rest of your life. But when things happen over and over, and there's this cumulative effect of people are making fun of me, people are laughing at me, people are calling me names. Some kid on the playground called me a dummy, and then a couple years later, I didn't do well in my spelling test in first grade. And so now I'm like, maybe I'm a dummy because he called me a dummy and I didn't do well in my spelling test. And then, third grade, I don't do well in my math test. Well, okay, maybe I am. Like you start to formulate this idea about yourself based on these experiences you've had. Those things are not even based in truth, but they feel very true. And so the things that we feel is what we operate out of.
Beau, are those crumpled up pieces of paper on top of the filing cabinet as well, both little and big T traumas?
Yeah, great question. And so I kind of look at it differently. I look at with the little T traumas that have this cumulative effect of negative belief about ourselves. I almost look at that as a file in the filing cabinet that we're building this file against ourselves. And so we have these experiences, and we're like, oh, this kid called me a dummy. Then I didn't do all my, spelling test. Then I didn't do well on my math test. And then, went home and you didn't have my room clean. My dad called me an idiot or something, like whatever. Like, you have all these things, and you get to a point where you begin to like look for things to confirm that this is true about you, because you've started this negative belief that's based on a lie to begin with, like you're not a dummy. But you began to believe that back on the playground when you're 5 years old, and you've had these little confirmations as far as you're concerned that this thing is true. Then you begin to be like, okay, well, this thing is true, so I'm going to go throughout my day trying to find things to confirm that. Like, oh, well, I am a dummy because I just cut that person off in traffic, and I'm a dummy because I didn't have correct change at the grocery store checkout. Like, whatever, like just these things don't even make sense in reality, but you're confirming to yourself this thing that you've come to believe about yourself. And so you're kind of building a file for yourself. You're like filling this file with all these sheets of confirmation about this thing about me that's not even true. But the more I confirm that thing about me, the more that's what I operate out of. So that stuff can be healed too, because those little T traumas have a very cumulative effect. And I kind of look like that instead of big stones in your backpack. I look at that as like taking a scoop of sand and putting it in your backpack. Like, it's not as heavy, it's not as bulky. It's like, but every time that happens, you put a little scoop of sand in there, and that's adding weight, and that's burdening you. So yeah.
Well, would you say, like, as you're talking about that, especially referencing being a child and being called a dummy, I can just imagine, because I'm thinking back to myself a few years ago and how I didn't understand mental health. And I didn't quite understand, well, how could being a child, hearing something like that affect me today? But one, would you say that it has a huge effect on us? And wouldn't some of those little T's be almost big T's because they happened to us when we were young and a lot more innocent and didn't understand the world yet? And that really shapes who we are. Like, science has shown us that how much we developed in those initial years affects who we are. And I think back to, you work with a lot of people with substance abuse. A lot of that is triggered from people's childhood. I remember hearing someone say once that, drugs, for example, they're not the problem, there's the solution. And it's about finding what was the problem. People find drugs and alcohol to try to solve their problems that they don't even know are. And a lot of times that comes from our childhood. And that can sound ridiculous to a lot of people, but how real would you say that is?
Oh, that's absolutely correct. I mean, I believe that I over the years of counseling and just years of life, I've known plenty of people who are addicted, right? I don't think I've ever known anyone who's addicted to substances who's not just self-medicating, not just treating things that they don't want to feel. And those things that they're feeling oftentimes have to do with the past and ways they've been impacted, and carrying these negative beliefs, like operating out of a place of shame because of these things that you've come to believe about yourself that aren't even true, not even based in truth, but they feel very true to you. That feels terrible. So substances make that feel better temporarily. And having been abused and believe certain things about yourself based on that, like substance abuse, I think is oftentimes, if not always, it's a strong statement, but oftentimes just related to our past traumas and things that we don't want to feel. And I think that, I'm not trying to call anyone or anything out here, but I think if you're going into a treatment facility and they're not addressing trauma, then they're not really addressing the problem anyway. We can learn ways to manage addiction. We can learn ways to kind of white knuckle and all these things to where we can just make it and just go another day without drinking, or just go another day without using. But oftentimes people end up back in a treatment facility or end up relapsing and back on the substance anyway. And it's not because they're a bad person. It's not because they're not strong. It's not because of any of these things. It's because the issue to begin with is the thing that they're dealing with the substance. And if that thing's still there, they're going to return to the thing that they've found the most comfort in. And so, yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure that I was going to respond to something you said earlier. I can't remember what it was, but Oh, you were talking about with your wife, and something should be fun, and it turns into something that's not fun because these things you've experienced. When we're living out of the context of our trauma, we live a life of reaction. Like, living life with trauma is a life of reaction because our brain is triggered in a way that we can't control. We don't get to choose when our brain is triggered by something, but it happens. And then we're going to react to that thing because our brain's been triggered. That reaction is not based on what's current reality. That reaction is based on what we experienced before that we feel like is coming into play right now, you know? And so if you're, yeah, Steve, I see you leaning.
Yeah. So I was sitting in the sauna the other day with a dear friend of mine, James Ashley, and he life coach, goes to a ton of therapy. Like, just we're all really focused on personal growth, exercising, the emotional and mental muscle through therapy, and physical muscles in the gym. But we were talking about trauma, and he was saying, and it just hit me when you were talking, that when you react, you have to imagine you're talking to whoever's reacting. You have to imagine that you're talking to the child who went through a trauma in that moment, in whatever it is. So would it be fair to say, Beau, that, like, my dad, love my dad. My dad's one of my closest friends. And growing up, he was a very observant and arguably critical man. Like, always remember, I cultivated, and it, like, a 10-acre field one day. It took me all day. And my dad points out the row, that one row was crooked because the blade hit a rock that was under the ground and it moved the blade side to side. Therefore, the row was crooked. I didn't know the rock was there. So all the work I did, and we're all just kind of, or at least I was, seeking my father's approval. So now, and I still, I remember that. So when I'm focused on something that is, I'm just kind of a perfectionist, I guess. And is it because I haven't grown from that kid who had parents who were very, supportive, but also like, you can do your best, Stephen. Was this your best? Like, why isn't that effectively perfect?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that again, we all end up kind of acting out of the experiences that we've had. And to be a perfectionist, somewhere deeper inside there may be a sense of, like, if I'm going to be loved and accepted and valued, I've got to do things just right. And I want to make sure, and you may not have that thought in your mind when you're going to, like, wash your car or clean your bathroom, like whatever, but somewhere down in there, you're like, I got to do this exactly right. And it has to be exactly right in order for me to have value, in order for me to be loved. And your dad never told you, hey, I'm not going to love you because that row's crooked. But inside, you have a deep need to be accepted and loved and approved of by your dad and affirmed by him. And so we begin to formulate these ideas and ways of being, adapting to our whatever our environment is and our circumstances are. We all want to be loved, and if you can do something that, like, moves you in the direction of feeling like you're loved and accepted and approved and valued, then you're going to do that thing, and that kind of becomes the course of how you operate.
I love that you mentioned that, Stephen, because my thought process, and I think about this a lot because I'm a visibly injured veteran, and, like, I've had this experience whether I'm at the VA or somewhere else. People think that I need it and they don't. And a lot of times, I think when we talk about childhood trauma and things that affected us, people think, well, wait a minute, I wasn't abused. My parents loved me. Everything was great. And our parents don't intend to do things. And as a parent, we don't intend to do things to our children, but things happen. And it does affect us for the rest of our life. And that's why I think it is so important that everyone is involved with doing the work, their mental health work, because things happen in life, not intentional, not, these extreme things, but those little T's that Beau mentioned. And it's important that we work through them to make sure that we're also living our best life. And then we're also passing that on to others. Because like my kids, I know that I have caused trauma on my own children, and that's why I have them in therapy. And now they're enjoying it because they realize, okay, maybe this is good for me. And there's so much that comes from it, because I worry that so many people, I'm sorry that I brought this back up, because I want listeners that think that they don't need therapy to realize we all have things that have happened to us, and we will continue to have things happen to us. And it doesn't have to be the big, grand, big T all the time, but we need to be working on those things just so that we are living our best lives.
Yeah. So how do you let things like that go, Beau? And like, does EMDR fix that? Because I do feel in many ways, like that. And I'm almost slightly embarrassed to say it, but like, I feel in many ways I am that child who still wants just to be loved by everybody.
Yeah.
I'm much stronger these days at transparently and vulnerably sharing if something hurts my feelings and things like that. I don't really back away from those conversations. But like, I remember 2 years ago, I called Amanda, Noah, and I was like, or maybe 3 years, I don't know, a while ago, because my dad and I practice real estate together down in Norfolk, and then in Toronto I have my own practice here as well. And Dad called and just said, "Hey, you did good on that." And I remember calling Amanda right after, Noah, and saying, "Hey, you won't believe this. Dad just called and said I just did something good." And that was it. That was the sole reason he called. I'm like, who are you and what have you done with my father? But I guess my point is I can feel it inside.
Sure.
And I don't know that we can all give our own self-affirming belief all the time. Like, we probably want validation, external validation from the people we love.
Yep.
How do you, like, I still feel that kid inside.
For sure.
When I bring up that story.
Yeah. And so I'll say this for starters. You say I feel embarrassed to say it. Like, man, I'm so glad you did say it, because, something that I believe very much in is that authenticity invites authenticity. And so just the very nature of this podcast and what y'all are doing here and being honest and vulnerable about your own experiences, that allows other people to feel like it's okay to be human and it's okay to feel these things. I don't have to pretend. I don't have to, be macho or like whatever. Like, it is human to feel, and it's the things that you're expressing. Everyone feels that. And so by you saying it, that vulnerability, that authenticity, that invites other people to be able to do that as well and feel that for themselves and know that it's okay. And so thanks for doing that. And this podcast is amazing just because of that very thing. And so, but yeah, to have that need for love and affirmation, it starts as a kid, and like you said, you can feel like a little boy, like your dad called and like that was the coolest thing, and you're a grown man. But yeah, because that little boy is still inside of you, still longing for that approval and affirmation from your dad and love from your dad. And when he called and said you did a great job, that's exactly what you wanted to hear all your life, and you can hear it, and you could hear it 100 more times, and it's not going to get old. If you had heard it that day that you plowed the field, and there was if you had said, "Man, this is fantastic," and it looks like you hit a rock there, no big deal, that happens. Man, imagine what that would be like. Just the needing that affirmation, and probably having that day that you did the field, and there was a twisted road or whatever. You were probably so proud of the work that you did, and you should have been. And if he had come and said to you, "Hey, man, you should be proud of this. This is fantastic," that would have gone a long way. And he didn't mean any harm by saying what he did and doing what he did, but those little things do leave an impact. And anyway, so it's cool. It's cool that you're able to recognize now that little boy is still in there, still needs affirmation, love, and acceptance, and you can articulate that now, and you can appreciate it when he does call you. So So,
Beau, like, with the idea of vulnerability and I mean, and to be clear, I remember it. Like, I can tell you exactly where it was in the field. There's this white pine it was just east of the White Pine. It was that row, like clear as day. It also just so happened to be like when you drive in the driveway, you know, you drive down a little bit, like it's kind of impossible to miss. But anywho, when it comes to vulnerability and people expressing that vulnerability, how would you suggest our listeners go about expressing it in a safe manner?
So yeah, that's a great question. And I think back to what we were talking about earlier, whether it's a therapist or a family member or a friend or whatever, felt safety is so important, you know. And I didn't really elaborate on felt safety, and I will, but like the felt safety is so important. You've got to feel like the person that you're sharing with can hear what you have to say. They don't have to say anything to fix you because you're not here to be fixed. You're just expressing what you're feeling, you know. But if someone is there for you, supporting you and hearing you and affirming, yeah, man, that sounds like that was hard. Thanks for sharing. That's all you need, you know? And so, but if you've got that person in your life, again, whether it's a therapist or friend or family member, and I think you know who that is that you can trust. And if it's not someone that you're close with, then finding a therapist that you can trust is great. But just being able to express, this is what I'm feeling, and being able to have someone hear you say that, sit in that with you, let you affirm you that was a real feeling, and it was probably hard. That's great. That's what you need, and that helps to validate for you that, like, oh, I'm not crazy. That's that vulnerability part. Like when I hear someone say, "Hey, this was really hard for me," and I felt like a little boy when I experienced this thing. That's fantastic because you know, it reminds me that I'm human and I feel those things too, and I don't have to be ashamed of that or embarrassed about that. And that's kind of, you know, there's two different approaches that I take to EMDR. One is like, we've got this trauma that we've identified and all these beliefs go along with that trauma. So let's go process that trauma and help to kind of eliminate all these false beliefs we have that go along with it. And the other way is like, I've identified this thing about me and I don't know where it came from, but I feel like I'm unlovable for some reason. Don't know why. Well, we can begin to like back that up a bit and be like, when's the last time you felt unlovable? When have you felt unlovable before that? When's the first time you felt unlovable? Like taking it as far back as you can with whatever memory you have about that thing and begin processing it there. So instead of having a trauma that we identified beliefs about, we have beliefs that we want to identify the early trauma about. And either way, getting to the root of it. And I may have shared this with you before, no, I don't know, but like I think of this like in terms of you know, the Jenga game where you pull the little pegs out.
Yeah.
The Jenga tower. So I kind of envision like that. If I've got this belief about me that I'm unlovable, and I've got this whole Jenga tower of unlovable beliefs, I don't necessarily want to start at the top. Like, oh man, just this morning I felt unlovable because the guy flipped me off in traffic, you know, like, or, you know, last week I felt unlovable because, you know, whatever. And we don't necessarily want to start here and back our way down. We want to go to the very bottom, the very base, the foundation of where that thing started. When is the very first time I felt unlovable, and start pulling the pegs out from there? Because when we can get the foundation where that seed was planted or that foundation was built that I'm unlovable, and we can make the whole tower collapse from there, that's where like the good stuff happens. Because you know, if you don't have this foundation of unlovable, then none of this other stuff even counts. So the past 30 years of feeling unlovable, that they don't have anything to stand on anymore because we identified the root cause. We collapsed the whole tower and therefore collapsed the whole belief of something that was never true to begin with.
You know, the talk of reacting and feeling like a child, the book, The Body Keeps the Score, I love mentioning that book. I think that was extremely eye-opening for me. And in that book, it talks about flashbacks. And for me, like when I would ever hear flashback, I would think of, the typical, Vietnam veteran that, would hear a bang and jump under a table. That's what you'd always hear people reference. But the book made a point of pointing out that a flashback is you acting like a child, going back to your child self and then losing that control. And I think back to myself as a child, like I would get angry and I would pitch a fit. And then as an adult, I would do the same thing. I would get angry and I'd want to break something. I'd want to get into a fight, whatever it was. And that was a flashback, a moment of not dealing with something in my past and having a belief in myself and how I was reacting to it. And I mentioned, now that I've started doing the work, I'm more aware of how things make me feel. Just like now, if I do something and my wife chuckles and laughs at it and I feel something, I can share that with her and say, oh, I have this feeling, and I'm not reacting the way I did before. And also, I love to tell people, before I started mental health work, started doing the work, I didn't know what anxiety was. It wasn't that I wasn't experiencing it. I just didn't know how to pinpoint and know what it was. I always joke and say, I just thought that it meant I needed to go do something inappropriate or dangerous. That was because my brain didn't know how to react to what I was feeling. And it wasn't until I started doing EMDR with you and then working on different stages of my life to find out what that root was to dealing with it, that I could start the work and doing the healing to deal with it. And you mentioned that earlier. It's not until you recognize it and see what it is that then you can start working to change it and then affecting that. Because I am one of those patients. I will say out loud that there were many times I was like, I don't like who I am. And you have constantly reiterated, that's not who you are. That's just what you've been doing because of your reaction. And a lot of changes have come from that once I was able to see it and heal it. I mentioned my friend who said that he is triggered by this, that, whatever, and he has those moments of reacting and he's not realizing that can be healed and you can have better reactions. As we talk about this and EMDR and the things that are happening, what would be something that if you could say one thing to a listener that, whether they feel the need, they know there's something going on, they need to do the work, or they're listening, they're like, this isn't for me. What is that? What was the main thing? I know we've said stuff throughout this podcast, but what is the most important thing that you would stress to someone that isn't dealing with the work they need to be doing?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. I think that, the thing is that what I'd say to them is you're worth it. Like you're worth it. You can heal, and you're worth that. You've been hurt, and I'm sorry for that. And the things you've experienced have injured you, and you can heal, and you can get back to, getting back to, for some people, they might not even remember who they were before trauma, But when you experience healing, you can get to a place where you feel more whole and you feel more valuable and you feel motivated and you feel lovable and you feel like you can love and receive love and you're worth that. Whoever that is, you're worth that. And there are stigmas around mental health, and thankfully, because of podcasts like this and other things, those stigmas are becoming less and less. But there are ideas that, like, doing mental health work is weak, and I think there are military cultures and law enforcement cultures that say, hey, you handle what you do, what comes your way, and you suck it up and you deal with it and you keep moving on. And that works for so long until it doesn't. And then when it doesn't, things fall apart, and for people who are questioning it, I'd be like, when I tell them that's the strongest work you can do, like it's the strongest thing you can do, to step forward and say, hey, I need help. There's nothing weak about that.
I think that I love you said that, because I think that the military culture is improving. The law enforcement culture, everything is improving because of what we're learning. And our leaders are realizing, hey, wait a minute, we have better soldiers if they're mentally taken care of.
Yep.
And so now that we're learning that, I've said this on stage, I've said this in your office, I believe that our veterans are going to lead the way in mental health. I think that the work that we are doing is going to be an example that is going to set the stage for a lot of civilians that have just the same amount of trauma and experiences in their life, but they're going to see the reaction of and the improvements of our military and veteran communities, and we are going to lead the way in improving mental health. And that's, whether or not that's true, I don't know, but I'm saying it because I want it to happen, and I want us to be the ones that lead from the front and show what is capable and what is possible.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I love that. I love that because I think it's true. I think that people admire and look up to veterans, and if veterans lead the way, I think people will find value in it and safety in it, and pursue it themselves. And quickly, I want to say we didn't really, and I don't know how much time we've got here, but I want to say for people who find entering into therapy difficult, segue into microcurrent neurofeedback. Something we do here at Sojourn that's provided all over the country and the world is ISS microcurrent neurofeedback, and it's very helpful in the therapy process for people who are even resistant to doing therapy, because what it does is it restores balance to your brain. And if I have a lot of trauma that I'm living with, and I don't feel like I can talk about it with anyone, or don't feel like I should or want to, if I can go through an experience of healing through microcurrent neurofeedback, which is basically restoring balance to the brain, and I can have a reduction in anxiety and depression and insomnia and ADD and memory, concentration issues and anger and all these things that are associated with my trauma, if I can see a reduction in that, I can feel like I can take a breath and be like, okay, maybe I can take the next step and go to talk to somebody and do some processing. Because EMDR therapy and brain spotting is a different modality, same sort of outcome. Those things provide real healing in traumatic memories, but that don't restore balance to the brain that is necessary for full healing. And so if you're doing EMDR therapy and microcurrent neurofeedback, you're processing traumatic memories and restoring balance to your brain. And so it's a double whammy approach. And so if you're having a hard time getting to EMDR therapy and doing the processing work, start with microcurrent neurofeedback, get some balance restored to your brain so you're having a reduction in all the other symptoms. So then you feel like you can enter into the processing work.
The microcurrent neurofeedback, tell us just a little bit more about it. And one thing that I want to ask you, because what was intriguing to me is, a lot of times when we hear certain types of people use something, it makes it easier to want to try it. And one thing that I had read is a lot of athletes have used microcurrent neurofeedback. Like, this is not just for trauma. This helps with a lot of different things. Touch on that. And then I want you to tell us, how we can learn more about this and Sojourn Counseling, what you're doing, and all of that. So just tell us about microcurrent neurofeedback.
To be very clear, we're going to have you back, Beau. This has been
yes.
I mean, personally, I feel like I've had a little roller coaster of emotions already today. So, hit us with the microcurrent neurofeedback, and I want to dive into EMDR so much more. Like the idea that it can replicate like REM sleep, and that helps you file it away and process those, little T traumas, big T traumas. To me, is fascinating.
Yeah.
All right. So to Noah's question,
it is EMDR is amazing, and I love it, and I'd love to have more conversation about it. Microcurrent neurofeedback. So, neurofeedback technology has been around since the 50s. So it's been around for decades, and it's been an effective therapy for a very long time. Very safe and effective therapy for a very long time. Microcurrent neurofeedback is a new and improved version of what's been around for decades. It's also very safe. So people get concerned about the idea of electric current stimulating their brain, rightfully so. It sounds scary, but it's because people are associating like electric shock therapy with this, and it's nothing like that. So the fact is that microcurrent neurofeedback is literally 1 million times less electric current being transmitted to your brain than when you hold your cell phone to your head. So if you can hold your phone to your head and you're okay with that, then you'll be okay with microcurrent neurofeedback. And it's just very strategically placed and delivered microcurrent of electricity that runs off AA batteries. We're not like plugging you into the wall or anything, but it runs off AA batteries. And I think it's actually the equivalent of like a tenth of a AA battery for a tenth of a second is the amount of electricity you're getting. So very small, but it's stimulating your brain waves in such a way that it stimulates them, and so that they can settle into a balanced state. And it is pretty remarkable the quick results that people see. Oftentimes our clients that come in for MCN will see positive change within the first 1, 2, 3 sessions.
NCN?
Microcurrent Neurofeedback, MCN.
Okay,
for sure. It's just a mouthful to continue saying microcurrent neurofeedback. But oftentimes people will notice a positive change happening, sometimes after the first session, sometimes after 2 or 3 sessions. But after 10 or 12 sessions, those changes are sustainable. And so if I've had a decrease in anxiety in my first 10 sessions of MCN, that's going to be ongoing and lasting. The thing is with kind of the American way, and I know you're in Canada, but around here, like the go-to is just medication. Like you have anxiety, you take anti-anxiety medication. You have depression, you take antidepressant medication. You can't sleep, you take sleeping medication. There's a medication for everything, and the go-to is just take the medication. Well, oftentimes the problem there is that if we're dealing with an electrical imbalance in our brain, the chemistry is not going to correct that, because you wouldn't call a chemist to your house to fix your electric current in your house. In the same way, you're not going to apply chemistry to correcting your electricity. So when we're taking medication, it's cool. I'm not anti-medication, but I think that it's not always the answer, because if we can restore balance to the brain, that's going to the root of the problem. Medication is treating symptoms. And in order to have relief in anxiety or depression, you take that medication every day. So I kind of view sometimes medication as a coping thing. Again, I'm not anti-medication. If it works for you, that's awesome. I'm not telling you to come off your medication.
It can be more of a Band-Aid, though, often than
it can be a Band-Aid. And my thing here,
that Jenga tower and getting to the foundation of the tower, is that just? It's like having a crack in a dam, and to me, the medication is kind of like putting a Band-Aid on it, and you got to keep applying the Band-Aid because it's going to fall off, as opposed to just fixing the damn dam.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, for sure. And when we can go to the root of the issue and correct, we've had so many people who've come off all of their medications after starting MCN because they realized, I don't need that thing anymore. And again, with medication, it's a coping thing, and I'm about healing, not coping. Coping is fantastic as a temporary measure, but it's not like the life plan. Like I'm going to cope the rest of my life. No, let's do some healing, and so you don't have to cope. And so medication can be coping. And the thing is with medication too is like sometimes you get on this medicine, and then the doctor's like, hey, we need to increase your dose, or we need to add this medication to it, or decrease your dose, or like there's this constant kind of juggling of the medications because you want to get it just right, and you're not hitting it just right because you're trying to adjust your electricity with chemistry. It doesn't always apply. So with that, MCN offers great relief pretty quickly in things like anxiety, depression, insomnia, ADD, ADHD, memory and concentration issues, anger. We see great relief in migraine. We've got plenty of clients over the years who are on the autism spectrum who have had great relief in things there. Fibromyalgia, Parkinson's, tremors. There are so many things that just restoring balance to your brain can correct. For me, it was insomnia. I had insomnia for almost 20 years. And we started doing microcurrent neurofeedback here at Sojourn in 2018. I did about a dozen sessions for myself just because I could. And I still sleep every night. That's been 6.5 years ago. And I'm not continuing to do it. I'm not taking medication, but I sleep at night. And it's because my brain was out of whack, and now balance has been restored, and I sleep. So it's sustainable, which is fantastic. And no, you talk about it's not just for trauma. It's not just for mental health issues. It is fantastic for athletes. I've had. It's fantastic for creative people. It's amazing the things for academics. I mean, so people come in and do MCN prior to taking like a medical exam or a law exam or something that's going to require all of their brain, because it helps with focus and attention and clarity and recall. And for athletes, it can take away things that inhibit. I had a guy who's like a semi-pro mountain biker, and he's like, man, I hopped on my bike and I felt less inhibited on these particular routes I was riding, more confident and able to execute that thing in a way that I haven't before. I've had authors and designers and artists and musicians who are like, man, my creative juices have started flowing again because of MCN, because it takes away barriers to your clarity, your creativity, your drive and ambition, motivation, a lot of things. The things we notice most in people who are living with trauma is a reduction in anxiety, a reduction in like short fuse anger, and improved sleep. But so helpful I like to make the joke that if you have a brain, it can help you. So all the listeners who have a brain, do MCN.
Noah, have you done MCN?
I have. And I loved it. One thing that I noticed when I did it is I would feel drained that evening. Like I would feel, I don't know if that happens to everybody, but I know I would feel tired. But I noticed a difference. Now I'll tell you, and I'd asked him, he doesn't mind me saying it, but my oldest son who has joined the Coast Guard, he was doing microcurrent neurofeedback before he went in. And now that he's up there in Long Island, just the other day, he was like, hey, can you find out if I can do some microcurrent neurofeedback while I'm up here? I was like, did you get, what did you feel from that? Because we never got a chance to really dive into it. He said that the biggest difference he noticed was he had a short fuse before and he could blow up and just get angry. And it
remind you of anybody?
Do what?
I said, does that remind you of anybody in somebody's?
Yeah, he may have picked that up from somebody. I don't know, but he
knows. Like we're all just adults dealing with our parents' childhood trauma.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know. Yes, he is me, and he noticed it. He felt a difference from it, and I'll tell you, like one of the things that I told people that I noticed from it, I always compared it to having a tire on your car out of balance. And how that one tire out of balance can affect the entire car and the ride and everything. And then smoothing that out improves the ability of the car to do what it needs to do. And I know that's a smaller way of comparing it, but that's one thing that I always said that I noticed from microcurrent neurofeedback. And I love it. I got, I have, my other son's doing it now, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But we're going to have you back on. We've said it. We want to have you back on real quick before Stephen closes this out and maybe has another question.
I got one last question. I can't wait.
All right. But Beau, I want you to tell everybody how we can find you, your website, what Sojourn Counseling, everything. Give us that spiel real quick.
And we'll link to everything in just for listeners too. Like what Beau says, it'll all be linked on YouTube in the show notes.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, our website is sojourncounseling.org. So SOJOURN, not a word that everyone is familiar with, but sojourncounseling.org. And that's where we are online. We're also on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. We got a YouTube channel. And then we have another website that we just launched last year called atease.org. So it's ATEASE.org. And that is a PTSD awareness and resource website. Got information, resources on there. Currently, it's just Alabama resources. Once we get all that settled, we're going to start expanding that out to a national resource for the U.S., where people who are living with post-traumatic stress can go there and find information that will hopefully be helpful for them, and also resources in their area to find help that they might need. My kind of tagline for all of it, Sojourn Counseling, at ease, and everything, is that there's hope for healing. And that's the message that I want everyone to hear. There is hope for healing. That means for everyone, little t, big T, everything in between. You can heal from your past. So
I can't tell you how perfect this segue is, because this entire, for listeners who aren't watching, on Beau's left hand across his knuckles, he has the letters HOPE. So when you say there's hope for healing, I've been wanting to ask this entire time, why do you have hope tattooed on your left hand?
Man, great question. It's because I believe that there's hope, and I want.
What would you say to somebody who doesn't have hope right now?
Yeah, that's a great question too. For someone who doesn't have hope, I'll tell you this: even though I don't know you, I have hope for you, because and I've said that to countless clients over the years, because I've had people come and say, "I have no hope," and I'm like, "I get it, man, because you've been through so much, and it doesn't look like things are changing. It doesn't look like there's a light at the end of the tunnel." But I can tell you that on your behalf, I'll have hope until you have hope of your own. And I'll say that to anybody who's listening or watching right now. Like, you may feel like there is no hope, and I guarantee you there is. It breaks my heart when I see news articles or stories about veterans or anyone who's taken their life because they haven't felt there's any hope. Because I know that there's hope, and if I could stand on the top of every mountain, in U.S. and Canada and everywhere else and say, "Hey, there's hope. Like, there's hope for healing." That's my message, and that's why it's on my hand, because what if it's a subliminal message out there for people who see my hand when I'm talking? That's awesome. If it brings up a conversation, people are like, "Hey, why does your hand say hope?" Like, I want to have that conversation because I believe that there's hope. And so yeah, that's what that's about. And I hope that everyone hears that message and will pursue their own healing so they can find their own hope.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Beau. That is.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much for having me on today. This is great.
Yeah. Well, we'll have you again soon. For the listeners, again, all the links to what Beau's up to will be in the show notes. If you like the episode, like it, let us know your comments down below, and hit subscribe, because apparently that does something good for us in the algorithms. And share the episode. There is hope for everyone, and wherever you are on your journey of building resilience and personal growth, we're going on this ride. So we hope you join us and let us know what you're up to, because we're here for you. So thanks again so much, Beau.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.